Hello, Wenecwtsin, and welcome to Coming Home, a limited sacred conversation series for the children of the past, the present, and the future. These conversations are hosted and facilitated by Charlene founder of reGEN Media, and feature the wisdom of Wenecwtsin, whose Indian name passed down to him, Wenecwtsin, means big voice that speaks the truth. We invite you to join us for conversations of hope, revival, and of the ancestors we intend to be for those yet unborn.
Wenecwtsin, I am so grateful to you and for our conversations. I deeply appreciate the wisdom and the knowledge transfer of Indigenous teachings that you have been so generous to share with me. And one of the most profound lessons that you've taught me thus far in our friendship is that we can heal ourselves and our families in 3 generations if we choose to keep this a sacred priority.
I'm curious if you had any thoughts or reflections on what you'd most like to talk about.
Well, it's, I think the issue of self-reflection and just kind of, that's kind of what I've been going through this last while in terms of, because when you see yourself on the big screen, it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's me. And then the story and then thinking back, okay, how the journey I've had, a lot of people don't know the whole story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what they're seeing is what they're seeing today after almost 70 years of my life, right? And so just reflecting back in terms of all the things that I've been through and how I've been able to manage through it all and still be here today. And at the end of the day, it is not for myself, because I'll at one point will be leaving this earth, and what can I leave behind? And when we break trail, when you do those kinds of things, it's kind of like, okay, what do we hope to leave people? And so I think that a big part of it is the messages of hope and healing, but I think they actually need to see things, visually see, I think that's part of it. So I think that, just a lot of self-reflection in terms of my life right now and where I'm going, and just sort of stepping back a little and just being able to take a look at it. It was an interesting process, because I think that the film itself is doing what it's supposed to do, but also it's raising questions, right? The questions are, okay, well, how did this healing happen? How do you do it? And so how do we know, when we're talking about separation, because I had lots of thoughts around my family that I didn't grow up with, right? And just thoughts around, okay, the relationship we have and don't have, etc. Those kinds of things. And I'm just sort of grounding. And yesterday I split wood. It was like, oh, it was nice to be outside and just doing something physical and just connecting to, this case, the land. And I was cutting the wood. I was just thanking the wood for doing what it does, like the trees, right? Because that's part of our teaching, just thanking it for, it's given its life so it can provide heat and warmth to myself and my family. Just little things. And we use the wood and the sweat to light the fire, right? To heat the rocks. So just a whole bunch of things like that swirling around. I'm trying to get grounded and make sense of it. And then reading the article, the wind speaker sort of helped that process. Yeah, this is where this needs to go. And because the unfortunate part, many of people that have been through, quote, the 60 scoop have no connection. And I was in it was interesting in Prince George, there was an artisan there that's actually Secwepemc from Adams Lake Indian Band, which is part of the Secwepemc Nation. And I was talking with her and her disconnect with her family. We talked about that. So I sent her the article this morning, I said, I hope you find this helpful. Just and also I sent her the book on the Secwepemc history, like that 500-page book we did. Just so I said, she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know really where she comes from. And so I think that that's just, again, part of the overall. So things happen sometimes and gives you an idea that, okay, there are literally thousands of people out there like that that don't have a connection. And so how do we help them make those connections? And I think that that's the important piece, because everybody's story is different. Everybody's journey on path is different, but we have a commonality, and it's the colonial sort of history, the colonial imposition of genocide upon us, that is, we all have that effect of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that, and I think we have to understand that, and that way we manage it and how we move forward is different, but we're all at the same place in many ways. And I think that that's what we have to remind ourselves, we are not alone. And I think that, like I said, I think we need to, those people out there that are feeling alone need to connect. And those that know them need to stand beside them. Like I said in the articles, how you support somebody. You don't have to necessarily talk with them. Just be with them until they're ready to begin the journey. And so I think that's a big piece of it. People that know people that are isolated in many ways and have no connection, start making that human connection, because we all share a common history, unfortunately, one of genocide, and we're all working through it. The 215, the children woke that up in our spirit to say, yeah, that this is real, what I'm experiencing every day. And so how do I carve a new path for myself? And it goes back to our teachings about Wenecwtsin, help yourself. And I think that literally, how do people help themselves? A lot of people don't know how to do that, because all the tools they've been given are colonial constructs and have limitations in many ways. It limits people because they've been told so many times, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not this, you're not that.
We all have that common background of colonial constructs, and we're all just, we're just doing the best we can.
We understand what's happened and where we're at. I think we all have that commonality in terms of the historical colonial construct, right? Genocide. And we're finding our way out of that fog, out of that process collectively. The children in 215 made it a worldwide issue. And everybody connected to that because we all sort of connected with, yeah, this is very real. And then the question is, what do we do about it? And I think that's where people are at right now. What do we do? If you have no connection, how do you create that connection? So what do we actually need to do for ourselves? How do we help ourselves if we've never been instructed or taught in this way? And I was never taught this stuff when I was little. I just was not. It was because of the times. It was during the 60s when racism was really high, when the residential school is still operating, and when our people were still viewed as non-human, the way we were treated. So coming out of that, and into what happened in the 80s and what we did in our community with child welfare, it was that connection back to who we are, and I could see that. And so getting involved in that and giving a voice to the people, the children specifically, it's what I still do. And I think that that's where we're at today. The children have given us voice again. And make an understanding that the children have opened up that door of healing for us. It's up to us to walk through it. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for us? And I think we can't go blindly because it's too much fear. So we have to have a path of some kind. So what does that look like? Where do we start? And I think that that's what we've been doing with the film and with the podcast, is saying, yeah, there's a way forward. Mm-hmm. Here are some things that myself personally have been through and how I've been able to manage, especially around the healing processes of water, which that article is all about. And it's the same teachings that Mary Thomas talks about. And Odette put those into the article. It's really interesting because, like I said, she was one of my mentors. She was one of the people in the Secwepemc Nation I used to go visit, and I used to spend a lot of time with her. I brought her into our community lots of times. So yeah, it was pretty interesting for me, just that
Mm-hmm.
notion of, and what we started off is like all these thoughts I've been having around, where I'm at and reflection, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because it truly is a journey. It's not static. Nothing stays in one place, right? I mean, everything is, there's movement and there's flow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
And
that's kind of what's important.
I'm curious what you might say to one or a group of people that are kind of in that same situation where they don't really know where they're from at this point, and they're just feeling fairly untethered. They're feeling untethered and unconnected. What might you suggest as just even a starting point of a practice or something simple that they could start to ground into, even if like geographically they don't know where they're from?
Well, I think it's, to me, it's really about reminding them that they need to take care of themselves on this journey of life. They have to help themselves. So where do they start? And I think with this artisan, I just sent the article, say, there's something you might find useful and helpful. And I think it's just getting people a starting point to understand, seeking understanding, right? Building that cognitive life raft. That's the first step. How do you build an understanding of what you've been through? How do you do that? And a big piece of it is just understanding, okay, I've been through this. Okay, what do I do about it? And building that understanding. And so I think that's what it is people have to and find ways to help themselves and on their own path, those things that are going to work for them. Because what works for me is not going to work for you or for anybody. It's just what will work for me. And so that's what we have to do. And I think that that's what I say to people is that you need to help yourself, but you need to feel, and we go back to the lessons of safety. You need to feel safe. What's going to work for you? If it doesn't feel safe, don't go there, because all you'll do is do more harm to yourself. And I think that's what we have to understand is that safety is really critical to healing. Safety creates trust, and trust creates healing, right? That's those three. I mean, we talk part of the podcast. That's what it's about. So how do you get people to begin that understanding? And sometimes it's through reading, sometimes it's through articles, sometimes it's through media, films. It's through podcasts, whatever is going to work for people. And I think that's what it is that people have to be able to look out and all these array of tools and say, okay, I can pull this in and look at it. To build that mental understanding for themselves where they need to go. So that's the key. And that's the advice. It's not so much advice, it's just what I would say, but it's in their hands, it's in their control. And most importantly, it's their life. It's they're writing their own story. And I think that's what's important. They have to understand they've got to take care of themselves. Even with our people that are in the healing profession, I remind that they need to look after themselves, because that's why burnout is so high. People don't look after themselves. They get to they give, and crash, right? And then they take time off and get back, and they go back into the grind. It's just a cycle. So I think that's what people have to understand is it's about balance, creating balance. But the biggest thing I think is making that commitment, your personal commitment to change, your personal commitment to healing for yourself. People have a hard time with commitment.
Yeah.
That's why children are great teachers, right? Because they don't learn by what they hear, they learn by what they see.
Exactly.
Children see things, right? And they say, okay, that's what the real world is, not what they're saying. This is what's real, right? You know what I mean? It's that whole process, and we translate that into the adult world, and that's similar.
Yeah.
It's no different. Just things that were imprinted on us when we were little still remain today.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think sometimes people need they need a crutch for their commitment until they can really own the commitment themselves. Like I remember when Willow was a little girl, her dad still smoked, and she was only about 5 years old, and they were driving in the car, and she said to her dad, I don't think it's appropriate that you're smoking around a child. And she was about 5. And, she was the teacher. He wasn't ready to quit for himself. And yet, he would quit for his child. And so I think sometimes people have to find that reason to commit, even though in our hearts we know that we are the reason, right?
That's so true, because that's really what it's about, right? It's about that commitment and the reason for the commitment, and understanding why you're making that commitment. Because early on, I was doing what I did because of my sons, my children. I made a commitment to them that they wouldn't see this kind of life that I lived and I went through, my mother went through. And I think that is the very beginning of my journey on this path.
Mm-hmm.
And then reflecting back on my childhood and all of those things is kind of interesting. So yeah, it's just that whole process, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious, after listening to this conversation, around, just reflection and legacy and commitment, what invitation you might have for a listener, what invitation you might have for them to maybe think about ongoing, or an action they might do. Does anything come up for you?
Yeah, that sort of that question or that process is so deeply wound around how willing are people willing to go, like what we talked about, that commitment. How willing are they to open up those pathways? Are they prepared to make that journey? And I think that's a big piece of it, is how do you get people on that journey? So why are they going to commit to this process? Why should they? Maybe they're comfortable in their life they're living, and that's fine. I think if people want to change what's going on in their life, if they want to stop repeating patterns of whatever dysfunction is happening in their relationships or work, whatever that stuff is, right? Is they have to be able to be honest and look at it, be honest with themselves, and say, yeah, okay, that's happening. What am I going to do about it? We go back to building that cognitive life raft. Because you need that mental understanding. Your mind has to connect with your emotions and your body and your spirit. When the mind is operating on its own and making up all these scenarios and all these thoughts, it runs you in circles. It runs chaos in your life. And so I think they have to, again, calm themselves down enough to ask the questions of, I'm doing these things, what can I change? And how can I change it? What do I need for resources? How am I going to do this? But again, it's that asking themselves that personal commitment, and goes again back to safety and trust. Are they feel safe with themselves? Do they trust themselves? Because as soon as they can answer those questions, they can move on. But a big piece of that is they have to understand that what life they've been going through, all the sort of trauma, whatever in their life, that's not who they are. People identify with being that, right? And I think that we identify with that kind of pain and that kind of suffering. We keep ourselves in that place. We have to say, okay, this is part of my journey. I've been through this. And what am I going to do different? What have I learned from this? What can I do different now? How can I build that understanding to move forward? What can I do to help myself? Healing really is something that is ongoing. It's like life. It's just an ongoing process, and I think that people have to embrace that it's not unfortunately in today's world, we're very much about instant this, instant that, right? You got drive through banking, drive through liquor stores, drive through this, drive through that, right? And it's like people want instant gratification. And that's why some of these things that happen, and you notice in the media, Instagram and TikTok, those things that are 30 seconds, 45 seconds, people gravitate towards that because they're only seeing chunks of the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they makes them feel good, whatever, right? It's kind of weird, I find, that they gravitate towards that kind of media. And so then a quick fix society, then healing is not on that path because it's not a quick fix. It's definitely a process where things can change in an instant by changing your thoughts, but people have to get to that understanding about themselves first.
Mm-hmm.
What we talked about early on is self-talk, how people talk to themselves. As soon as they can master that, then they start moving towards healing. Just a number of, sort of, it sounds simplistic, but it's things that we keep. The mind is a powerful tool, and we have to learn how to align with it and make it our ally, not our enemy, by our thoughts. And I think that's what we really have to think about in this whole process, is how do we begin that process for people? How do people begin that for themselves? And they have to, be courageous. They have to have courage. And they've got to be able to understand that you don't give up. One of the first things I learned in working with our people is that there are 4 things our people did and why we're still here. The first one is that we would plan as a people. We didn't just go off and just do things randomly. We planned. And we planned things in such a way that it was done seasonally. We planned for the seasons, and that really sort of evolved in terms of what we needed to do for ourselves, for our families, for the community, and for the nation. And I think the second thing that we did is we were hard workers. We worked hard. Our people are hard workers. Things that we do I think that's really important. Our people worked hard. You think about all the things that we've been through, they worked hard to get us to this place in history, this place on the timeline, right? And continuing with time. And I think that's really important to understand that. And I think that's a really, really, really important part of it. The third thing that our people did is they never, ever gave up. As hard as things were, they never, ever gave up. You think about the smallpox, you think about colonization, all the things, racism, all those things that our people were attacked vis-a-vis legislation and the colonial system. They never gave up. In spite of all those things happening, they never, ever gave up. And I think that's an important part. That's the third thing our people did. And the fourth thing our people did is ceremony and connection to that part of ourselves, prayer. It's really people, I think sometimes people mix up prayer and spirituality with religion. It wasn't religion, it was connection. Spirituality is the concept of we're part of we're part of the whole process. We're part of everything. When we say reGEN and all our relatives, we mean everything, not just the two-legged, we mean everything. That's our worldview. And that's how we were taught from the very beginning. We're connected to everything. We have a responsibility to things. And I think that those 4 sort of processes is what's brought us to this point, and will continue. Lessons, I think that whatever you're doing, if you could learn from those 4 lessons, plan, I think is really important. Work hard, and I think it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter sometimes, right? The third thing is never give up, because in spite of the obstacles our people have faced, they never gave up. And utilizing prayer and ceremony as part of the process. That's why we're still here today. That's why we made it through the residential school. That's why we made it through the 60s school. That's why we made it through the colonial process of the reservations and these institutes of genocide. That's why we're here. If you think about that in that concept, the whole planning piece is really, that's part of, these are giving people tools to plan something different for themselves. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? And even doing it seasonally, because that's our cycle. Our cycles are seasonal cycles. It doesn't, I think what I learned early on in my whole healing journey was to have some kind of framework in which to work within, a 7-day plan. I think it's just, again, you can go out, there's lots of tools out there that can help. I think picking them up, there's all kinds of different tools, books, things that people can read and adapt, because it helps people gain that sense of, if you will, control over their own lives to change. to make change. And I think it's important that people understand that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Those 4 reflections on the type of people that we are. And yeah, and they are also a helpful framework to move forward. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, the interesting part for me is that this whole notion of elder, right? I don't believe in that term. First of all, it's a colonial construct that comes from a colonial sort of mindset, because it's eldership is being weaponized these days, unfortunately. It's not a good thing. Just because a person, quote, is an elder, they use that to say things that are very inappropriate at times. I don't, that's not what I know. I really see myself as a knowledge translator. I translate knowledge that I know. And I think in our language, the Stakyam or old one, and it doesn't mean old as in old. It means that you have wisdom with that age, and that sometimes I think it's important to understand that. So if we take that concept and sort of understand it, it really is about how do we translate the knowledge we have. Even yourself, you have knowledge. How do you help somebody translate the knowledge you have to somebody to help? Because I think we're on this earth to help each other. Help each other. I think that's really why we're here. Because otherwise, what's the purpose of being on this earth with how many billion people, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is we're not helping each other around the world. We're just got stuck and see what's going on in the world. We've lost sight of the original teachings that people had. Not just our race, but all races had. We've lost their original teachings. I think we're coming back to our original teachings, and we're more connected. The other sort of races are not. They're still sort of in limbo. And so there's things that in our creation story that talk about that, what would happen when people try to make up their own laws versus, utilizing the laws that are handed to them. So,
thank you for joining us for Coming Home. This episode was brought to you by reGEN Media, the first and only Indigenous-owned and female-led wraparound ecosystem that facilitates the creation, funding, and distribution of regenerative media projects through a relational filmmaking model. Together, we aspire to turn the page from the last darker chapter of our history to the next, more hopeful and empowering chapter. Visit us again next time for more shared wisdom, knowledge, and another conversation. For more information about Coming Home, reGEN Media, Wenecwtsin, and more, visit reGENimpactmedia.com. Until next time, puru and goodbye.